Hello and welcome to the Womb Centered Healing Podcast. And I'm actually thinking this will be on the Writing from the Womb podcast as well, perhaps, because I have two podcasts. And as you can see, if you're watching the video, I have Sheena here with me, who has the covers of two collaborative book projects that she's been involved in: the Asian Women Who Boss Up book project, which is already available, already published and available, if I'm remembering correctly, and the International Women of Color Who Boss Up book project, which is a new one coming out soon. So Sheena, I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit more, share with us about these book projects, and we'll lead into the conversation about how where womb-centered healing, what your womb-centered healing journey is about. And we already discussed about how, for a lot of people, the womb-centered healing journey is about connecting with our soul purpose. And I know you're going to have some great stories to tell us about that. So take it away, Sheena.
Yes, thank you, Sama, for having me on your show. I'm really honored to be here today to talk to your listeners about the books and a little bit about my journey. So, as for the listeners out there, my name is Sheena Yap Chan. I am in Toronto, Canada, and I am in two books, two book collaborations. One is called Asian Women Who Boss Up, which is now on Amazon, and you can also pre-order a signed copy of the book on my website, which I'll share later on. And the other book, which is International Women of Color, that's launching on Amazon on April 27th. So be on the lookout for that. Both of these books are very important, in my opinion, just because growing up in Canada as an Asian woman, I never really had any role models, like Asian women role models to look up to. And so I never thought I was worthy enough to go out there and do my own thing. And so everything actually started with my own podcast called the Tao of Self Confidence, where I interview Asian women about their journey to self confidence. And for me, that is important because society still sees Asian women as quiet and submissive and obedient, or treated as sex objects. And with what's been going on in the world, we've been an easy target for Asian hate crimes, and especially what happened in the Atlanta shooting, right? The Asian women were treated as objects. They weren't even humanized. They couldn't even say their name right. They couldn't even spell their name right. And so it's just such a shame that we're still going through things like this, right? And most people think, well, that's just one incident. It's actually not one incident. It's just, this is the incident that just made it really like known to the public that we've been dealing with this for years. And so my sole purpose is to really elevate women, especially Asian women, and to elevate them in different platforms. As much as I love my podcast and what it's done, I realize that I still need to put myself out there. And it's not always easy to put yourself out there, right? Because you don't know what people will expect. You still have all these fears. You still go through self-doubt, but it's all a part of life. And when you have a purpose that's bigger than you, you'll have the confidence to go out there and do it, even if you're scared, because this is something that's bigger than you. I remember when Tam showed me the cover for Asian Women Who Boss Up, I was like so excited. It was kind of like when I saw Crazy Rich Asians for the first time. I was like, finally, there's a movie about Asians. And same thing. Finally, there's a book about Asian women, and not the stereotypical Asian women that you always see in movies or you always see on TV shows. This is, women who are powerful, who are strong, who are able to overcome all kinds of challenges and roadblocks and still able to thrive. And the International Women Who Boss Up book is just as important because we're, as women of color, we're still very underrepresented, right? And so we really need to go out there and promote, the right kind of diversity and inclusion, because a lot of companies out there say they are for diversity and inclusion, and they just do the bare minimum, tick a couple boxes and call it a day. And that's not what true diversity is, right? And so also being able to stand in solidarity with what's been going on. Like, this is such a powerful book to just showcase, like, we're all in this together. And so I'm really excited for both books to be out, to have something like this, because to be honest, I haven't seen books that highlight Asian women on a cover of a book, or women of color, or this many like Asian women on a cover of a book, or this many women of color on a book. And so I always say, if you really crave for that representation, you just got to do it, right? Even if you start from zero, even if you have no clue what you're doing, because sometimes we just got to figure it out along the way. And, it took me a while also to build up my own confidence because of my upbringing, right? As Asian women, we're told to never say anything, never make any noise, stay in the background, do as you're told. We're told to live one way of life, and that's it. But, we're all different people, and we all can't live one way of life, right? We're all going to live lives differently. And if we try to stay in that line that society tells us or that our culture tells us, that's how we end up, not feeling good about ourselves, not feeling worthy, not feeling enough, because we feel like we're kept in the shell or in this box. So part of it is I help women break out of their shell so they can, show up as their authentic selves and be able to live life on their terms. Because especially what's been going on in the world today, like life is so short, you don't know what's going to happen. So we have to do our best to live a good life and live a meaningful life. I know sometimes it's easier said than done, but if you really want something, you're going to go out there and do it, even if it sucks, even where there's days where you want to ugly cry and like quit, because we all have those days, right? Sometimes, like even yesterday, I like sometimes would sit down and be like, is what I'm doing even worth doing? Like, does this make any sense? And then when a woman comes up to me and sends me a message saying, I really love all the work that you're doing, I'm so grateful that you're doing this, like it makes it all worthwhile. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Oh, thank you so much, Sheena. It's wonderful to hear your passion for these projects, for it seems like you've really found your soul purpose, or I like to talk about soul purpose as knowing our soul purpose as a womb-centered power and ability. We're taught to ignore that inner voice
Oh yeah.
that I feel is coming from the womb, and the womb space is energetically where we connect to our soul. If you think about what happens when a baby is forming, when we're starting to develop in our mother's womb, as our body develops, our soul is incarnating more and more and more through the portal that is the womb. And that portal can be active if we allow it to be, if we acknowledge the womb as a vital organ and an energetic space in our body that has this power. If we acknowledge and recognize that power, it's not limited to just making a baby. And I know I shared with you earlier, I haven't had born any children, and you shared with me that you haven't born any children. And what we end up nourishing and bringing into incarnation in our lives can be different things besides children. And that's one way that we can break out of the shell of what society has been sort of encapsulating women and womb bearers as childbearing beings, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of cross-cultural. It might be stronger in some cultures than others, but that's sort of what that all aims at, with those cultural limitations that you're talking about. And as we start to say, wait a second, I'm not just about making a baby, I have these other passions in me. Even women who do have babies might feel like, oh, I have these other passions in me, this purpose, this sense of like, I'm here for a purpose, and I need to bring it into the world. I need to birth this purpose into the world, whether it's a book or a business or whatever it is, a podcast. If we don't allow that to happen, that's when a lot of womb ailments and other ailments, physical, emotional, spiritual, start to crop up, and that's a source of a lot of suffering. And there's a lot of structural things in society that are sort of meant to keep us from accessing that in ourselves, because for all kinds of reasons we could go
Yeah.
into, but there's all these unhealthy directions that human society has evolved to not encourage that. And so it sounds like you have found ways not only for yourself really connect with and channel that that soul purpose energy, but also to help others to find that for themselves. Can you share with us a little bit more about that? Maybe a personal story where you started to wake up to, oh my goodness, I'm not feeling super connected to all these ways that society and my family and whoever is trying to make me move and live my life, and I really want to live my life a different way, and you discover your purpose along the way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it started when my aunt passed away almost 10 years ago. She actually passed away from a freak accident, and we were all just shocked because we didn't expect that to happen. You know, the situation was like something you would watch on TV, and a part of us were in denial that it actually happened. And so that was a wake-up call for me because I realized like, oh my God, life is so short and I'm still working a 9 to 5 job. Like I couldn't see myself working at a cubicle till I was 60. Like I just couldn't see it, but a part of me was too scared to go out there and do it. But after seeing my like what happened to my aunt, like even though she passed away in her late 50s, she was still able to do so many things that most 20 and 30-year-olds would want to do. And so her quality of life, at least she was able to live life to her terms. And I wanted to do the same. Like I just couldn't see myself waiting till at a retirement age to start living life. And of course, it didn't happen overnight. That was just the beginning, right? Because it's not like I said, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to quit the next day. Nobody does that, right? But slowly, you know, like when you're working on yourself, you realize like something just needs to change, and you sometimes you can't even explain it, right? I remember just looking at somewhere to live, right? I just like I want to go somewhere and just live there. Just I wanted to live there, and for some reason like Hawaii popped up, and I was like, oh, Hawaii, yeah, why not, right? And I've never been to Hawaii in my whole life. Of course, I've seen it on TV, beautiful palm trees, nice beaches, and so I don't know. I just had to go there and I had no clue why. And so a lot of us, right? Like there's this feeling, but we're not too sure why we need to go there. But it's just we have to go there, even though we can't explain it. I don't know if you've ever felt that way. And so, you know, I guess a couple of years after that, I decided to like quit my job, sell my condo, and decided to live in Hawaii for like 2 winters. And honestly, I think I was just there to really heal myself, get to know who I was, be able to just recharge and restore myself. Because when you go to Hawaii, I don't know if you've ever been, there's this energy that you can feel when you go there. This like amazing energy. I can't explain it. People understand when once they go there, but like I always have a soft spot for Hawaii. I just love being there, and so that since then I was able to, you know, really start my podcast and realize like this is what I'm going to do. And I still didn't really have a clue back then when I started the podcast. I just knew I wanted to create a positive impact. I wanted to help women. And I was just going to start with this, right? Sometimes we start things, we have no clue what we're doing, and we're going to figure it out along the way. And of course, there's ups and downs along the way. I still felt like it wasn't good enough, especially when you're interviewing so many women who've done such amazing things. Sometimes that can actually bring your confidence down because you're like, oh my God, these women have like really changed the world. And here I am just talking to them.
Mm.
So I had to work on myself too. And one thing I realized is that, you know, I don't have to do it alone, right? A lot of us feel like we have to do everything by ourselves, but really, it's okay to ask for help, especially in our culture. Like asking for help is a big no-no. It's a huge taboo because it's like a sign of weakness, or it feels like we're asking for a handout. And it's also a pride issue, right? We're too prideful to ask for help because it looks demeaning, or you're too good for it. And sometimes we have to learn to let that pride down and just ask for help, because when you ask for help and there's someone out there who is willing to help you, it really helps you heal a lot faster. It helps you become more confident and keep moving forward towards your purpose. And even with the pandemic, right? When this whole pandemic started, I was like thinking it was the end of the world. I was like, everything's closed down. It feels like the Twilight Zone. I'm just gonna like watch Netflix all day and eat junk food. And I was like in this whole like rabbit hole of depression because I was like this world, like what has happened to 2020? This is the end of the world, right? It can be really dramatic, but like, you know, when you're stuck at home, you have nowhere to go to, your mind can play with you.
Mm.
And I really love talking about, mental health because it's such an important topic, especially in Asian culture. It's still a huge taboo. And I want to be able to bring it up as much as I can so that people out there can realize like they're not the only ones who go through these things. Like we all go through it, especially when you're at home and in a lockdown or you have all these restrictions, it's going to heighten a lot more. And so that's why we need outlets to, you know, feel our feelings or talk to somebody or talk to a mental health professional or listen to podcasts like these, because if you're keeping it all in, it's going to make it even worse. And it actually wasn't until I actually met Tam and started this project, like it regained my confidence, came back again, right? Of course, it wasn't easy, but I was able to push through some of the fears I had and like some of my own self-doubt. Like I had to push through so many things just to be here today to talk about it. And so whoever's listening, if you're going through something, just know it's temporary and you can come out of it any given moment. And the best part is you don't have to do it alone, especially now that we have the internet. Like we can really connect with people from around the world with a click of a button or a swipe or whatever it is, right? It's such an easy way to connect with people. And, when you come from a good heart and good intentions, like people can tell, right? They understand like you're not just randomly connecting with them, like there's a purpose for it.
Mm. Wow. So you've shared about so many things. I want to go back to when you started sharing this last round of sharing. You were talking about having a knowing or a desire to go to Hawaii, and you didn't know why,
Yeah.
and you just knew that you needed to go. And I just wanted to talk about that because people have that experience of a different kind of knowing that doesn't make logical sense. Like
Yeah.
there wasn't like a list of pros and a list of cons and you kind of added up the accounting or anything like that. There wasn't like oh yeah, I got a job in Hawaii. Oh yeah, there was this, program I wanted to and be, get involved. There was no logical reason for you to go to Hawaii, but there was a knowing from inside. And what I like to call that is womb wisdom.
Oh,
So
nice.
our womb wisdom is connected to our soul purpose, and our spirit is sort of whispering to us through our womb. And in some traditions, like in the Hindu tradition, there's a place in the body that's considered the direct line to your individuated divine self. And that place is about 2 inches below the navel and back towards the spine. Guess what's there?
The womb.
That's exactly right.
I was like, is this a trick question?
No, it's not a trick question. It's so obvious when you imagine that
Yeah.
space in your body that, oh, okay. And that's also called the Purusha, where we connect with our individuated divine self. So the philosophy of that is that the divine includes everything. And we're also individuals, and there's individuated things within everything, right? So there's animals, there's dogs, cats, there's creatures in the ocean. There's all these individuated things, but it's all part of the divine, and each individuated living thing and element has a purpose within the divine intelligence, and we're no different. And this is like the divine umbilical cord. The womb has this divine umbilical cord to that divine intelligence. This is the philosophy of that, where this womb wisdom is coming from. And a lot of people call that kind of knowing like your intuition or a gut feeling.
Yeah.
um and it is very related to the guts too. There's more brain matter in our belly than there is in our actual head.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yes. By mass, there's more in the belly. And so there's all this intelligence that we're not taught how to listen to.
Oh, yeah.
And it's often the better tool for the job for things like, what am I going to do with my life? Or how am I going to be in this relationship with another person? All the intelligence around that, and how, how to create a society that takes care of everyone and like that. The intelligence that's best applied for those kinds of questions is in the belly and not in the logical thinking mind. The logical thinking mind is very small. It's only about 5% of our brain matter. And we're taught that that's the place to go for every solution for everything in life. And we fail miserably all the time. How many times has your logical thinking mind given you good relationship advice?
Yeah.
Never. Right. And so,
Yeah.
I just wanted to commend you and speak to that, to sort of bring that to the forefront as far as what if somebody's looking for their sole purpose. We need to listen from a different voice inside of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Using your logical thinking mind to figure out your sole purpose, it may have a role in that, like for example going to see a career counselor and filling out some kind of a form and looking at things that you like. But if you're limited to the career options that the career counselor gave you, you're being led down a path of very limited possibilities.
Yeah.
And I wanted to also speak to or well, first, before we go on to other topics, I'd love to hear what you have to say, any further reflections about
Yeah.
shared.
Especially when you're talking about gut feeling and knowing your intuition as Asian women, growing up, we're not taught to go with our flow, right? And I think that's probably why women tend to overthink a lot, right? Because we use our brain to the point that it stops us from taking action, versus like we have this gut feeling that's telling us to go do something, even if it doesn't look like how it's pictured in our head. But we stop it, right? Because we don't trust ourselves. We're too busy overthinking things. And because of that, women go through a huge confidence gap over men, where as women, we love to over prepare to the point that even though we're 150% ready to do something, we still hold back because we're overthinking everything, versus a man, he's maybe 20% ready and he'll go with his gut feeling and just do it even if it doesn't pan out right. At least he went for it, right? And so when you were talking about that, I was like, oh wow, that was like a big eye opener for myself, because I didn't even think of it that way.
Mhm. Yeah. And there's reasons for that, why that are built into our society that supports men to go out there and make mistakes and
Yeah.
fumble around, and men can be relative less competent and still get the job and get paid still and not get fired, whereas women,
Women.
especially women, Asian women, maybe, I know certainly women of color, um, uh, have this sense of having to be 110% or 200% uh, competent in order to just get the same recognition as a man would, or a white person would, right? Or a
Yeah.
Caucasian person would, because of the systemic um, racism and
All the biases.
right, privilege systems in our societal structures. It's systemic, and it's not that most of the time those things aren't happening because somebody is deliberately trying to put a woman down, or put an Asian person down, or put a woman of color down, or a person of color. They're not intentionally trying to do that. It's a subconscious structure. um, and then there are the people that are intentionally doing
Yeah.
that, which we also spoke to earlier. And so what I wanted to bring that is that there, so just to normalize that there would be this trepidation, because there's danger if you go out there and take a risk, and there's even more of an impetus to stay safe when there's danger, if you go out there and look different or try something new, or experiment before you have all the details worked out. And I just wanted to normalize that and recognize that there's all these systemic reasons why it makes sense to be a little more cautious, right?
Yeah.
And yet, if we're going to change those systems, we got to take those risks, right? Because those
If
systems
not,
it's not going to just change by themselves, right?
yeah, for sure.
And so I'm curious how you help. You talked about helping people come out of their shell. How do you help people to um, be ready to take risks like that and step over the threshold of where they feel safe in
Yeah.
order to explore and follow that gut feeling?
Yeah, it's part of it is leading by example. A lot of people are afraid to take action. So sometimes you just got to go out there and take the action. And when they see you doing it, people will follow, right? It's like, oh, if she did it and she's okay, then I can do it. And also just being able to change the way they see things, right? Like our mindset is the most important thing. If you think you can't do it, you're not going to go out there and do it. You really got to learn to believe in yourself. You got to learn to, feed your mind with good stuff. You got to go out there and, you know, realize like you don't have to do everything alone. Like for me, like what really helped me was hiring a coach to help me push through some of my things. And so I do the same thing for others, just being that accountability partner, helping them just push through some of their fears, because a lot of people don't realize it's not as bad as as they think once they do it, right? It's like, I'm still standing, I didn't die, it wasn't as embarrassing as I thought, and I can move on.
Mm.
And so really helping especially women just kind of push through their fears and realize like there's a bigger purpose to what they're doing, is really important. And being able to learn to just show up as themselves imperfectly. Let's face it, there's no such thing as perfection. I always say practice makes progression, and the more we can learn to just show up imperfectly, the more we can feel better about themselves. Being able to share your story, being able to share your mess, right? Because life is messy, it's not perfect, right?
Mm.
It's like a roller coaster. Sometimes we're up, sometimes we're down, especially in this crazy time of the pandemic. It's even like crazier because we never expected it. We don't know how to really handle it. And we're just taking it day by day. So we got to give ourselves a little bit of, just like take good care of ourselves, learn to care for ourselves a lot more because of what's been going on, and being a little bit nicer to ourselves, because we're really, as women, we're very critical of our own ourselves, right? Like I know I was, and so I had to learn to be my own best friend. And I tell women, like, you gotta learn to treat yourself as your own best friend, because you would never treat your best friend that way. You would never call her stupid, or you look ugly in that t-shirt, or you're a failure. You would encourage your best friend if she's going through a tough time. And so you should do the same thing for yourself.
Mm.
So, a lot of mindset work, learning to take action, but not learning to take action together versus doing it on your own. Makes, for me, I think it makes a huge difference, because it's helped me do some of the things that I had to push through, like even learning to put myself on video. Like if I didn't have a women's group that was doing the same thing, I wouldn't be here today, showing up and talking to you about it, because I would still be so fearful of putting myself on video.
Mm. This fear of having our imperfections witnessed by others, I just want to unpack that a little bit, because what I'm seeing is that myth of the perfect woman or the perfect person
Yeah.
is a very oppressive structure. And it's this myth of that the more perfect you are, the more worthy you will be to receive the things that you need, and that you have to be perfect in some, like, okay, let's define that. What does that mean?
Exactly.
Who's defining what perfect means, right? And why? That's another question. Why is that considered perfect? That set of qualities considered perfect? And if you don't achieve that perfection, then you are subject to persecution, to being put down, to being neglected,
Yeah.
and having your basic needs not being met. So this is the societal structures, the oppressive societal structures that we are living in, that we have not really eliminated yet. And there are a lot of people that are really clinging to that system, that hierarchical system that says this type of person, this type of woman, with this type of man, this type of, any kind of person is the ideal. And if you don't fit this ideal, then you're not worthy to have your basic needs met to be alive. You're not worthy to live.
Yeah.
And so that societal structure, just to hear again, to normalize why we have so much fear and why it's so difficult to do something like step forward in our imperfection and let ourselves be visible in our imperfection and seek help to admit that we don't have it all handled and that we aren't in this, whatever that perfect set of already figured it out, already have all the answers, already, look a certain way, already have everything we
Yeah.
might need. Is if we very few people fit in that little perfection bubble, right? Perhaps nobody even really fits in that. Some people have more resources and more ability to pretend like they fit in that and not let anyone else see, but most people don't fit in that perfection bubble. And so when we and what is the purpose of that perfection bubble but to have us all striving for something that's not even really beneficial to us or
Yeah.
society or our lives or our health or our well-being. It's, if we really unpack how those perfection ideals um, got put up there for everybody to strive for, we start to discover some pretty nefarious um, and unhealthy aspects of our history and our society that are based on oppression, exploitation, racism, classism, only the wealthy elite having the right to make decisions and control everybody else. And it's very sociopathic. It's not healthy society at all. It's not a model of healthy society. And so it's a model of horrendous harm to everyone involved. And
Yeah.
so when we start to look at that, we say, oh, I don't want to have anything to do with that perfection bubble. Forget
Yeah.
it. I'm not dyeing my hair. This is me. Okay, now I'm
Yeah.
speaking for me. I'm not dyeing my hair. I'm not plucking my eyebrows. I'm not wearing makeup. I'm not shaving my legs. Forget it. I am not doing that perfection bubble because that's what it represents. That's what it's trying to get us all to aim towards. And so I just wanted to speak to that, to sort of disarm the power that that perfection bubble has over us. And once we disarm that, then we can say, oh, well, if I'm not chasing after that perfection bubble for myself, then gosh, I have permission to just be myself and find a different voice, a different motivation. What does my soul really want? What do I really want? What do I really desire? What's important to me and for my own reasons, not because I'm chasing after this impossible, oppressive ideal of who to be and who to become. So, okay, there I went off.
It's okay. I mean, it's a very important topic. And, a lot of people try to strive for something that doesn't exist, right? And
Yeah.
so the more each of us can just show up as our imperfect self, people find people listening or people watching the video can realize I don't always have to try and hide myself. I can actually just show up as myself and people will love me just the way I am.
Yeah. And that's where we can return to what we're really longing for, is that unconditional love, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
And it starts with ourself, right? Like you can't expect people to give you that unconditional love if you don't give yourself that unconditional
right.
love.
And yet, unfortunately, for most of us, because our parents and the other adults in our lives when we were growing up were chasing after that perfection ideal, and oftentimes pressuring us as their children to be another part of that perfection ideal for them to make that picture I was just talking about this with my mom, to like fit that picture. We don't get that unconditional love modeled for us by our parents because it's impossible to fit that picture. That picture doesn't exist. And so if our parents are very attached because their success, their financial success, their societal status, and all of these things are dependent on their life and their family and their kids all looking a certain way. But if you don't, and then you're one of the, you're one of the kids that doesn't fit any of that,
Yeah.
then you're not getting that unconditional love. And we learn to be critical of ourselves because our parents were critical of ourselves, and our parents were critical of themselves, and that's why they were, and they learned to do that so that they could, try and aim for that. That's the whole part of the
Yeah.
equation.
And it becomes a vicious cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that switch from self-criticism to unconditional self-love is so powerful. And I'm curious what tools, tricks, tips you might have to share about from your personal experience of making that switch for yourself and what you found to be really helpful for the people that you support.
Yeah, I think it starts with awareness, right? For me, I used to think self-love was loving the best parts of you.
Mm.
And so I would always just love the best parts of me, and I would disregard anything like ugly or bad about me, right? I would actually just be like, "Ugh, I can't be like that. Like, this is bad." But when I realized that unconditional love is, loving the good, bad, and ugly parts of you, that's when I realized, like, oh, this is something that I have to learn doing, because I'm also attracting people who only love me for my best parts and not my worst parts.
Mm.
And it was a huge like wake up call for me. So it really took a lot of mindset work, reading self help books, listening to podcasts, and even learning to say affirmations, right? And I don't need to say like 100. I only say 3 actually when I go through like moments of self-doubt or not feeling good enough. I say I am love, I am enough, and I am worthy. And of course, when it's the first time you're saying that, of course it's going to feel weird because you're not used to telling yourself these things. But the more you keep doing it, the less awkward it will be, and you'll feel a lot better, right? And I keep telling myself the same 3 things until I feel better about myself. So for me, self talk, positive self talk, and learning to love yourself through self talk is very important. And even in my sleep, I'll even listen to positive audio, right? Just so that I can unprogram all the things that I've been thinking, from the moment I was born till now. And that takes a lot of time because we've been programmed with so many things, right? It's not going to go away in a day. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of work. And so people don't realize, just because you're sleeping, your brain's actually still awake. And so it's the best time to like listen to positive audio during your sleep, or even like, they have even audios where you can learn a language in your sleep, right? So
Right. Mm-hmm.
those are some of the things I do. And also surrounding myself with like-minded people, because I'm not always going to be confident. I'm not always going to be positive. And so if I'm feeling down, there's someone at least who can kind of like cheer me up, or just kind of give me that little push to just keep moving forward, or to tell me like, you're doing a good job. Don't worry about it. Keep going. Life happens. We're just going to keep going. So I think it's really important to have support, because you don't have to do this alone. And when you can learn that asking for support is okay, the more you'll be able to have the confidence to even ask for help, and help it'll make your journey a lot faster, right? Like healing and building confidence, because now you're not doing this alone. You're doing it with amazing people. Like even with the books behind me, to those who are watching the video, like seeing this many women on a cover of a book is amazing. And then even having all of us promoting the same vision, the same mission of empowering women out there to do and be more, that makes a huge difference versus you doing it by yourself. And it doesn't matter how talented you are. You can be the most talented person in the world, but nothing beats working together as a team.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Wow. And that's so revolutionary too, working together as a team, because the whole individualism thing where each person has to become this perfected version of a human being by themselves and climb the heap. That's a big part of what keeps these oppressive systems in place, is that we all think we have to do it alone. And so remembering community and coming together in a co-creative mutually supportive community is so central to the womb-centered healing work. I wanted to ask you one more question before we wrap up, because you were talking about loving not just the best parts
Parts.
of yourself, but also the ugly or not so great parts of yourself. Can you give us a specific example and maybe tell us about a not so savory part of yourself that you had to learn to love, and the transformation or the difference in the relationship you had with yourself that ensued from that process?
Oh yeah, I mean, I used to think being a failure was really bad. Like every time I failed at something, I just thought I was the stupidest person in the world. Or even if I made a mistake, I would be so hard on myself.
Mm.
And learning to just learn from your mistakes and being okay to learn, like to make mistakes along the way. That's really helped me just accept that, you know what, I make mistakes. It's not the end of the world. We can always fix it. Or even looking at failure as something positive versus negative. Because when I was in kindergarten in the Philippines, the teacher actually failed. I actually failed kindergarten for coloring outside the lines. And I think that's why I was so disheartened when I would fail at something, because I thought it would be like the end of all ends, or I was just not good enough. Like I remember taking my driver's test and I even failed that, and I was bawling my eyes out because I was like, oh my God, I'm the worst driver. I'm such a failure. I can't even pass a driver's test. And so learning to see failure as, you know, it's just feedback, you know, it's just showing you what's not working so you can find another way to make it work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a great example is Colonel Sanders, right? He found 1,000 ways, or he got turned down 1,000 times for his fried chicken idea, but the one person that did say yes, like, look where Kentucky Fried Chicken is now. And so another great thing is learning to embrace rejection, right? Because nobody likes to get rejected. I mean, it's getting rejected sucks, but when we can learn to disconnect from it and just keep moving forward, you know, we become unstoppable, right? And before, like when someone would like reject me, whether in business and in life or in relationships, like I would take it to heart, and I would just feel like the lowest person ever, or the biggest loser ever, because I'm like, why is this happening to me? Am I just like a big loser? Like, am I somebody that nobody loves? And so learning to know your worth and realize, like, you know what, things happen for a reason, and it's their loss, not yours. You know, better things are coming along. And sometimes you just have to go through this period to learn a lesson, right? Maybe it's to tell a story to somebody who's going through a similar situation, whatever that may be. So yeah, those are some of the things I've kind of really found out, even just learning to love my body just the way it is, even if I have, you know, love handles on the side. I mean, we all have it. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Right. And the rules for what a perfect body is supposed to look like, again, it's a very narrow um, set, and it changes depending on what time period you're alive in, uh,
Age.
what age you are. I mean, that perfect body is one of the biggest myths, and it's so detrimental when we buy into it and we're hard on ourselves around that. Just a little note around all that. Thank you so much for sharing all this wisdom about self-love um, and everything that you've shared here today. If folks want to get in touch with you about perhaps getting a copy of these books, and perhaps talking to you about other things, your podcast or whatever else you have to offer, how might they do so?
Yeah, for sure. So people can connect with me on my website, sheenayapchan.com. They can pre-order a copy of Asian Women Who Boss Up. They can get a free report called 8 Ways to Boss Up Your Confidence in Life and Business. They can also have a complimentary 20-minute one-on-one coaching. So it's all on the website. For the podcast, you can check out the Tao of Self Confidence on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or check out our website, the taoofselfconfidence.com. There's tons of episodes that you can binge on for sure. And you can definitely relate to at least one woman in the podcast. And if all else fails, you can just Google my name, Sheena Yap Chan, because I'm the only Sheena Yap Chan on the internet.
Wow, that's great. So it's Sheena, Sheena, Yap, Yap, Chan, Chan, just to clarify, for folks who might not be sure how to spell all that. So thank you so much for coming on the show. And we can put links in the show notes if you send those to me. And listeners know that if you want to find out more about what's happening in the Womb Centered Healing Temple, you can go to wombcenteredhealing.com and sign up for the newsletter there. You'll get announcements about the latest podcast episodes, the latest blog episodes, and upcoming courses and events. So hope to see you there soon. Thanks so much. Great to be with you here today, Sheena. That's all for now. Until next time.